Hey kids, welcome back. So I get asked a lot of questions about Mack Western. What's a Mack Western and what's a Mack Eastern? So here's a quick little video. Now, throw this out there first. This is not going to be comprehensive, and there's probably going to be a few things that are specific to one or the other that I don't mention, or there may be a few rare, unique examples of something to the contrary. But I'm speaking in broad terms, difference between a Mack Western and a Mack Eastern. So Mack Western was a specific division of Mack that was formed in 1966 with a factory out in Hayward, California, out in the San Francisco Bay Area on the east side of the bay. It was in response to the trend at the time of having a lot of lightweight components get factored into trucks that were built more for the western states. And previously Mack had done a few western models built out of their eastern plant, specifically a W71 cabover, really rare cabover, something like less than 300 were made, I believe, give or take. Anyway, then there was the LTL Mack and some other Macks from the 1950s, but those weren't specifically built from the ground up for the Western market. So in 1966, Mack builds a plant out in Hayward, California. They take the F model, which was the steel cabover from the East Coast that had debuted a few years prior, and they did some finagling, did some special things to it, and they came out with an FL series cabover, L being standing for lightweight. But and we'll get into that nomenclature changed a little bit as production went on. So initially in 1966, it was the FL cabover. It had a lot of aluminum components in it, aluminum doors, aluminum frame rails, and any place that could save weight, they did. The other feature of the Western Macks typically was that it had a powertrain from Cummins or Detroit Diesel. You could get a Mack in them, but Mack engines were a little bit more rare in the Western series. Then in 1967, give or take, the R model also developed into a Western model, and then the RL series was born. And about that same time, due to customer demand, Mack also started offering steel frame rails on the Western model. So the nomenclature started changing, and we'll go over that here right now. You'll see here RS700L, R being R model, S being steel for steel frame rails, 700 series, which was the longer hood series in the conventionals. And then the last L there, that just stands for lightweight. So RS700L. If this truck had aluminum frame rails, it would be an RL700L. If it had a standard hood, it would be an RS600L. And then when the RS700, RL700 series changed to the superliners in 1977, mid-1977, then the RL and RS600Ls changed to the value liners, and those ran up into 1989. So Western Mack. Now, the Western Macks went through a series of changes. Now I'm going to get down to just the R models, guys. So when the R model Westerns came out, they had the standard R model cab, which was a shallow wall cab, and it had a steel dash. And then the hoods that they used on the Western models, because the initial Western Mack R models were just long hoods, the 700 series. And the hoods they were using were the exact same hoods as the East Coast, with what was called a high mount, what's referred to later as a high mount fender. In late 1972, Mack came out with a drop fender hood. So they redesigned a hood specifically for the RS and RL 700 series. And the hood kind of looks like a regular R model hood, but there's a lot of differences to it. So let's go over those. First is the drop fender hood. You'll notice there's this distance here of about 4 inches from this relief line down to the top of the fender. Before this, the hood sat higher. So this Mack is a 1970 from the factory. And again, it's been rebuilt with a lot of other parts and stuff. The cab, hood, and sleeper are not original to this truck. And when we rebuilt it, we put later model stuff on it. But when this truck came from the factory, this truck had a high fender hood, which, if you read the book, Convoy, The Comprehensive Untold Story, or you watch some other videos or posts, you'll know that that difference in hoods was what initially clued me into there being more than one truck for the movie. So, and you'll notice that difference in the movie, because of where the grill guard is on this truck, the headlights sit differently inside that grill guard depending on whether or not it's the high fender hood or it's the later drop fender hood. So in addition to having different fenders, these bezels, while they look a lot like the other R model bezels, these bezels are different and they are not interchangeable with a Mack Eastern hood. The most noticeable difference in a Mack Western is this grill surround, which changed a lot during production. The earlier ones had like a mesh grill and it came down and went down into the bumper area. And then the later Western Macks had this kind of surround. Now there was several different versions of this. If the truck had no air conditioning or if it had a roof mounted air conditioner, then this whole grill assembly was one piece and there was a mesh in here that was built into this. If the truck had a air conditioner that was with the grill denser up front, then it had this here, and this surround was multiple piece. Now they no longer make that, you can't find it anymore. So when we did this truck, we used a stamped grill surround, we cut out the mesh, and then we put this grill denser in here. And for your trivia buffs, this grill denser is in fact a Kenworth grill denser, and that's what Mack used originally. They used a Kenworth part on a Mack as their air conditioning condenser slash grill. So Mack Westerns also have the smaller script here, the smaller MACK. That's a lot smaller, and that was for derivative of the F models, not the larger script like the Mack Easterns have. There were some changes, running changes with turn signals, and after 1977, late 1977, these turn signals changed. A little bit of a corner on these that was common on the Superliners and the Value Liners. And then here you can see a 700 series hood, whether it's the Eastern hood, the old original hood, Eastern hood, high fender, or this drop fender hood, has this extra piece here, and that tells you right off the bat that this is a 700 or a long conventional. Westerns also had this running change in the battery box and air tank assemblies. When Mack originally built the R model Western, it was built on the FL series frame, FS, FL series frame, the cab over frame, and down in this area, there's like a stirrup step with two, and a little cover that had these two holes on the side, sits right in front of the battery box and above the air tanks. In late 1974, beginning 1975, the RS and RL 700 series trucks got converted over to the Cruiseliner frame. The Cruiseliner debuted in November 1974 as a 1975 model, and so then this chassis became the same chassis as a Cruiseliner chassis, and then this battery box and air tank arrangement continued. Now, in the mid to late 80s, on the Value Liner series and Superliners, sometimes you'd see just one air tank, especially on the passenger side. There were multiple arrangements of air tanks available with this, and including on some contractor versions like mixers and dumpers for the RL 600, RS 600 Western series, the Value Liners. Sometimes there were no air tanks below them. But that battery box cover is not interchangeable with an Eastern Mack. It's different. So, come back around. Oh, almost forgot. Mack Westerns typically had the round Snyder tanks with external steps. Easterns weren't like that. This style fuel tank you could get on an Eastern as a special order, but you could not get, I don't believe you can get the Eastern tanks on a Mack Western. And notice that these fuel tanks mount in the traditional way with straps and a regular frame mount, not like the Easterns, which I'll show you in a second. This is a Mack Eastern. Now, I should have mentioned this before, there is no such thing officially as a Mack Eastern. People will use the term Eastern Mack or Mack Eastern in reference to the manufacturing plant in Macungie, Pennsylvania, and Allentown, Pennsylvania just before that. But there was never officially a term of Mack Eastern, but it's just used in opposite to Mack Western. And you'll notice, even on these Macks, the fender sits right by the relief line. Now, on an Eastern Mack, there were several different versions of this R model hood, including some in the early 1970s that had a relief line back here as well. And I can't speak to interchangeability of them, but generally speaking, they were the same, roughly the same size and same shape. 600 Mack, notice here how the fender stopped right at the back of the hood. Also, the shape of this fender, the trailing end of this fender on an Eastern is different than the trailing end of the fender on a Mack Western. Mack Western has this separate splash guard down at the bottom, and the hood stops pretty high up. Mentioned before, headlight bezels are different on a Mack Eastern. Larger script. This is the later model grille that came in typically after the aftercoolers were installed on the Macks in the mid-1980s. And then I mentioned it before, the fuel tanks. This is a standard Eastern fuel tank. Eastern fuel tanks typically had the steps cut into the fuel tank here at the bottom, top, and not the external ones. Now you could order you could order that. A lot of fleets like Roadway and ABF that had regular R models in the mid 1980s and late 1980s, they ordered the fuel tanks, like the Snyder fuel tanks, with the external mounted steps. The other thing Eastern has is this front tank mount. In most cases, it sets in the tank and mounts the tank. That bolts this bracket to the tank in the front, and then you got the more traditional in the rear. Now the driver's side in this truck has the same setup on both tanks, and you'll notice that this tank is built so it was interchangeable between the driver's side and passenger side. That would be the front mount if the tank was turned around. A couple other odd things about Easterns versus Westerns. Mack's made out of Macungie, typically had frame mounted exhaust with this exhaust stand. It runs off the frame, and the exhaust is not bolted in any way, shape, or form to the cab. Incidentally, that is the original polished stainless steel muffler for this truck. Nice little touch. The Mack Westerns, the exhaust is bracketed to the cab, and that is not up top. That is not the factory original upper exhaust mount in this truck, but these are. And you'll notice there's no frame bracketry back here. So, lots of difference between the Mack Western and the Mack Eastern. Also, a Mack Western, on the VIN plate that's inside the door, it will show Mack Western on it. And a truck that was built out of the Macungie plant will just have Mack. This 89 Mack was built out of the Mack Canada plant for delivery in the US, ordered original new by a customer in Chicago. Sometimes they just built them out of the Canadian plant and shipped them back across the border. Don't know why. But that's that. So, 89 Mack Eastern, actually Canadian built. 1970 Mack Western with features from a 1977 and 1975 and up. Something else I forgot to mention. In late 1972, not long after the drop fender hood debuted, Mack came out with the +3 cab. And you'll notice here that there's a line here, relief line. That's where the cabs used to have the rear wall. And they added this 3 inches to the back of the cab for more room, more belly room for the drivers. When they did that, this style grab handle also debuted. Before this, there was a small grab handle mounted up a little bit higher here. And if you look really carefully in still photos of this truck, that was used in the movie, the original small handle is still bolted behind this. And the cab was originally ended here. Some other note about this particular truck, in the movie, the sleeper was never cut into the cab on this truck when it was used in the movie. The sleeper was bolted on there, and in a lot of still photos you see of this truck, you can look all the way through and see daylight all the way through. The sleeper was never cut into the back of the cab. And if you're paying attention to the movie, as they're coming up the hill, when Pigpen says, "Hey Duck, it looks like we got us a GD convoy," you'll notice if you look through the window, which was this truck with the high fender hood, you'll notice you can see reflections off the back glass because the glass was still in the truck. Day cab was never cut through. So, any questions, hit me up. Looking forward to talking to you, looking forward to conversing. Have a great day, and hope that explains some stuff.